Right is on. Hey, good evening, everyone. I'd like to call the meeting to order and welcome you to the regular meeting of the Milwaukie Planning Commission. Agendas and additional copies of staff reports are available on the city website at www.milwaukieoregon.gov. You can locate them by navigating to the community calendar where tonight's meeting page is posted. If you have not reviewed the agenda, please do so. It contains important information about the process. Our first order of business is our native lands acknowledgement. The city of Milwaukie respectfully acknowledges that our community is located on the ancestral homeland of the Clackamas people. In 1855, the surviving members of the Clackamas signed the Willamette Valley Treaty, also known as the Kalapuya Treaty, with the federal government in good faith. We offer our respect and gratitude to the indigenous people of this land. Next order of business is meeting minutes. I'd like to move on to the approval of the meeting minutes of the January 9th, 2024 and the January 23rd, 2024 meeting. Do we have any corrections to make? Seeing none, I'd like to entertain a motion to approve the notes as presented. Could I get a motion?
I move that we approve the notes as presented.
Second.
Commissioner Losfeld moved and it was seconded. All those in favor, say aye.
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 Motion passes unanimously. I do think we should try and let Commissioner Losfeld move for everything tonight, given her last meeting here on Planning Commission. You can get it out of your system. You can get it in the record.
I think I'm going to start Robert's rule.
There. That's great. Yeah, children, you don't have a second on that one. Are there any informational items from staff?
Yeah, I just wanted to share with everybody that on Thursday night here in this room from 5:30 to 7:30, we're having an open house for a bunch of different projects. So we're talking about the Highway 224 and some improvements that are being made there, the Monroe Street Greenway, some information about the transportation system plan, and then some Kellogg Creek information. So we've got staff from the city, staff from ODOT, staff from the North Clackamas Watershed Council. So we've got lots of folks in the room. So if you're interested in those projects, feel free to stop in anytime between 5:30 and 7:30. There will be kids activities, so adults can participate and have something for the kids to do, and there'll be some light snacks. So hope everybody can come out.
Great. Anything else? No? Just also add on the meeting agenda for anyone who cares about bicycle or pedestrian safety. There's a special report that's going to be presented at City Council next Tuesday, 6 p.m. on the 29th Avenue Neighborhood Greenway. So if you're interested in those topics, feel free to tune in person in this room or probably on the interwebs as usual. We'll move on to our audience participation. This is an opportunity to comment on items not on tonight's agenda. Do we have anyone tuning in? We don't have anyone tuning in and we don't have anyone in the room. So nothing against audience participation, but we'll just move on to the Community Involvement Advisory Committee. At this point of the agenda, the Planning Commission will act as the Community Involvement Advisory Committee. Does staff have any updates to provide, and do CIAC members have any items to report on?
I do not.
No staff reports? Commissioners? All right. We set a record a while ago. We got out, was it 6:59? It's not going to happen tonight,
6:59. I think it was the fastest.
It was the fastest planning commission meeting ever. Commissioner
We're like,
Losfeld.
Lauren would be so
Yeah.
happy.
We all like cheered you and
Oh my gosh.
yeah.
Anymore, you all.
That's great.
That's saving public money.
It is saving taxpayer resources. Well, let's move on to then our first work session item of the night, which is an update on the transportation system plan, including the timeline, what's been accomplished to date, next steps, which will be introduced by staff.
All right, great. Thank you so much. I'm gonna kind of just do a high-level presentation of all the stuff that's been done thus far. I provided links in the staff report to the actual work, so if there's anything that you want to ask me about, feel free to do so, but this is a pretty high level. I'm just to kind of show you where we are. And I'm glad that Ryan is here tonight because Ryan has been my right-hand person on the TSP. He's been spending a lot of time on this. And so, and when we get to the community profile, Ryan did all of that work. So I am happy that he's here with us tonight. Okay, let's go on to the next one. So Transportation System Plan Overview. So what is the Transportation System Plan? It's just briefly, it identifies the transportation goals and policies. And if you all remember, part of the comprehensive plan that was adopted in 2020, it had a blank page where the transportation system goals and policies were meant to be, knowing that this process was coming later. So the goals and policies that we're working on now will actually be adopted, as will the entire TSP, into the comprehensive plan. So we have the goals and policies that guide us, that guide the projects. Then we do an inventory of what we've got on the ground, what kind of pedestrian network, bicycle network, street network, what's our connectivity like, transit, how's transit working, and then we take a look at that and we see where are the deficiencies based on our goals and policies and try to identify what we're going to need over our 20-year period. And then we identify the projects that we're going to need to get us to where we need to go. And we do a prioritization of those projects. TSPs, we don't just do this in a vacuum. It really needs to be consistent with regional and state rules. And there's quite a few of those. And also you've got to have a TSP in order to get state and federal funding. So we use this as a way to identify projects that we can actually get money for. We need to go in and identify and address the range of needs and preferences for historically underrepresented groups. That is work that we were going to do as part of this TSP before climate-friendly, equitable communities rulemaking came down the pipeline. But there's a real emphasis from the state on looking at our historically underrepresented groups and making sure that the projects that are selected reflect the needs of those groups of folks. We need to be sure that we're removing barriers to equitable outcomes for all of the community members. We need to engage, and when I say we need to engage with all the people that will come and talk to us so that we can go talk to. So we've got lots of folks that we are trying to get out and talk to. So everyone in the community is invited to participate in this process. We need to be sure that we're making our transportation facilities safe for everyone with a particular focus on vulnerable users. We need to have a balanced and multimodal transportation system that focuses on pedestrians, cyclists, rollers, and transit users. We need to reduce vehicle miles traveled and greenhouse gas emissions. That was part of the charge when we, on our own, and then the state is actually requiring that as well. We need to look at how we're changing with our population growth and what the land use patterns are and what the new context is for within which we're doing our planning work. And we need to find flexible and implementable funding strategy. So that's kind of the overall objectives of the whole TSP, right? And so this is just kind of a little slide to show you the trajectory of the timeline. And so basically we've got community engagement opportunities all throughout the process, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in depth. We also are meeting with our Transportation System Plan Advisory Committee on a regular basis, as well as our TSP Technical Committee on an ongoing basis. The first steps and kind of these are the tasks in the project. We have to look at the policy and planning framework, and we're going to talk a little bit about that tonight. We're going to work on the goals and policies, and then we do the performance measures analysis. That comes late spring, early summer. Then we get into the livable streets analysis and recommendations, and again, that's late spring, early summer. Then over the summer, we do the conditions, needs and analysis and the gaps analysis in the system. Then we try to find solutions to those gaps. And then we identify the projects that are going to get put in the TSP and then ultimately get put into the capital improvements project list, which is where the money hits the road, and fully adopt the full TSPs, hopefully by the middle of 2025. So that's just kind of an overview of the process, of the timeline. And so then moving on to the review process, just to kind of give you a little idea of how this thing is working, because it's a pretty big project, it's got lots of pieces in it. So basically what we do is the project management team, staff with our consultants, is we go through and we develop a lot of background information and documents. And then we take those documents, so everything that you're gonna see tonight, we have taken through the advisory committee and the technical committee, right? And then we take those documents out to the community and get feedback from them. Then we come to the planning commission and get feedback from the planning commission. And then we take the same documents to the city council. So everyone is seeing the exact same documents. And as we're going through those documents, and at each step along the way, we're updating those documents as we go, so that by the time it gets to city council, it will have gone through a really robust process, engagement process with the whole community. And so what we've done so far is we're 3 advisory and technical committee meetings into this. We've reviewed the plans and policy framework, the community profile, the engagement plan, the financial forecast, and just recently, the goals and policies. So we have done all of those things with those groups up until this point. And then, so then moving kind of into the framework within which we're doing our planning. And I mentioned this earlier, it's just, we have things that the community wants, and then we're working with it in this context of our state policy, right? We have to deal with the transportation planning rule. We have to think about climate-friendly, equitable communities rulemaking. When we're looking at regional policies, we know that Metro's got a regional transportation plan. We've got the climate smart strategy. Clackamas County is getting ready to update their transportation system plan. And then the city, we're not starting from scratch here, right? The city's already done so much work on all of this. We have a comprehensive plan that we're looking at. We have our zoning code. We have our climate action plan. We have our Safe Access for Everyone program. We have the work that we've done on neighborhood hubs. We've got the council goals. So all of those things kind of go into shaping ultimately what the transportation system plan looks like, because a lot of work has already been done. We're just building on that work. So we're going to do a brief overview of the community profile. And if you saw that, so it's basically 2 pieces. The first piece is that we needed to establish a shared cultural and historical understanding of growth and development over time in the community. We needed to provide a snapshot of who lives in the community, and with a particular focus on underserved populations. And both of those things would help us inform our community engagement strategy, and ultimately this equity analysis that we need to do. And that is kind of what we're doing. This is a new thing that we haven't really done with transportation system plans before. So this is kind of, we had an approach that we thought was the right approach to do it. Different communities will do it differently, I think, but we like to do data and we like to understand things, and so we kind of did some deep dives. But the first thing that we did, and that Ryan and I can take very little credit for, if you want to change the slide there, Ryan, is looking at Milwaukee's historical and cultural context. And so this is really 4 things, and it's looking at really the history of land use in the city and transportation in the city, and then looking at folks that we haven't had been represented in the process very well, and really acknowledging the removal of indigenous peoples from these lands, looking at our racist history and our land use laws and our redlining and excluding people. And this isn't unique to Milwaukie, as we live in a state that did this for a long time. But in order to kind of address and move forward, we have to kind of look to the past and acknowledge the harms that we've done to those populations. So we also had to kind of look at the transportation, what big transportation things, projects have impacted the city along the way. And then also we need to think about the contemporary statements of equity and climate, and City Council adopted equity and climate goals back in 2020. So all of those things we need to acknowledge and talk a little bit about. And I, in all fairness, if you read the background for the community profile, Ryan and I and the consultants, we take no credit for this. This background was really established as part of the comprehensive plan process, which I really commend the people in the city of Milwaukie for acknowledging that this needed to be done and acknowledged very publicly. And the city did that, I think, before a lot of folks did that. And there's a really good, if you look in the comprehensive plan, there's a really good narration about our past history. And so it was a combination of that history and the comprehensive plan, and then work that the city manager's office had done to kind of put together a timeline of historical evolution through the city. So I think it's a really interesting document, and I would encourage you all to read it. So that was the first part of the community profile. And then the second part of the community profile is really looking at data. Like I said, who lives here? Who is the population in Milwaukie? And then what does it look like compared to other places? And then kind of trying to compare like our growth rates and try to understand how much we've been growing. And so kind of just understand that Milwaukie has grown very, very, very slowly. And will likely to continue to grow very, very slowly. As you all are well aware, we're built out. We don't have urban growth. We're not on the edge of the urban growth boundary, so we're not going into greenfields. So we are going to work within the context within which we are today. A lot of changes have been made to our zoning code to allow more types of housing, and we've been looking at more density. And so small incremental changes will happen over time, but generally Milwaukee's been growing pretty slowly. We wanted to look at kind of what the makeup is of the city to try to understand when we go out and try to do engagement, to be sure that we are engaging all the different kinds of folks that live here in the city. And so we know that we have 10% Latinx folks here. And so if our engagement isn't reaching that, then we need to go out and dig deeper and try to find more avenues to engage folks, so that our numbers kind of reflect, when we look at our engagement strategies and we look at who are getting to talk to us, that they reflect the folks that live here. So that's that's why we needed to really get a good understanding of that. And then we really wanted to do kind of an overview of, not just an overview, Ryan did a really deep dive. So if you really want to get into the community, the data, Ryan did a really great job by digging into a lot of the data, trying to understand our underserved populations and looking at the poverty level and trying to understand what our median income looks like to the rest of the region, because income impacts how you make transportation choices, thinking about single parent households, and folks with a disability, and then looking at same-sex couples, and just trying to understand those folks and how the transportation system plan might impact how they get around and what we can do to improve that for those folks. And so if you want to get really deep into the data, or if you have any questions about that data, I have the data man right next to me. Okay, so community profile. I'll just take a pause. Anything you want to ask me now, or I'll just keep on rolling. We can get to the end of it. All right, I'm saying go. Okay, we're gonna go. So community engagement, what are we gonna do? So really the Transportation System Plan Advisory Committee is a really big component of that engagement, because I think if you all recall, we've got 16 folks on that committee that are spread out all out the city. So that's why there's this group of people that are kind of leading, like looking at that first cut of everything, right? And so we've got our advisory committee meetings. But then when we're going out to the entire community, we've got 7 outreach events, and you'll see that it's broken down to when we're going to go talk to folks, which is basically the exact same outline of tasks that you saw in that initial project overview. So our first in-person event, note, March 21st, right here in this room, 6 to 7:30. We're going to have a sit-down portion of that from 6:15 to 7:15. We're gonna do a workshop with folks on the goals and policies. We wanna get feedback on those goals and policies. We will have childcare, so you can bring your children and they will be in another room and they will be watched by someone, and we will have refreshments, and so that's like a little workshop that we're gonna do. Then, and you can see the other three, we're doing big outreach events. And then we will also always have the online component, just like we, Engage Milwaukie, what we use when we've had so many of these surveys go out. So we will basically be mimicking everything that we do at these outreach events online, because we want to make it that anybody can give their thoughts without actually having to be in the room, because not everybody can be in the room or would want to be in the room. And then we've got 3 actual events that are just online only. So we've got the methodology and performance measures, livable streets analysis, and then the draft TSP. And so everybody can do a deep dive into that. And so that's kind of what we've got for the big outreach events. Then we really want to try to reach underserved populations, like we said before. So we've got lots of different ways that we plan on doing that by outreaching to folks at Hillside Manor. We've been partnering with the school to tap into some of the school events so that we can reach those communities. We're looking at going to the Milwaukie Community Center, Wichita Center, doing interviews and focus groups. And so really trying all along the way to reach out to folks that are not going to come to our events, but we can go to them. And then also we're partnering up with all of the other events that are going on at the city. Hence, I will be here on Thursday night for this multiple project open house. So we're going to talk about the TSP. So there's lots of other events that are going on in the city, and we will be there throughout the process to talk to folks about the TSP. And then again, I already told you about that first community event, so I hope that folks will be there, including you all, if you want to be there. Excuse me. All right. And then this is a photograph. I was so excited. We got a photograph from our first meeting down in the community room. It was great. I mean, not our first meeting, but one of our in-person meetings with the advisory committee. And it's just really nice to be back in a room with folks. And then the next thing, and really important, is financial forecast, right? Because I think one of the things that we all struggle with is it's really exciting to come up with all these great ideas and these new projects, but unless we understand where the money comes from, there's a disconnect. So we want to be sure that everybody understands that we have limited resources. And so you have to go and you have to understand, where does the money come from? And then you can see here, taxes, fees, grants, investments, bonds, revenue franchise. I mean, so we went and we worked with the finance department to figure out exactly how much is coming in. Then we have to look at what is going out. And so we have to look at personnel, materials and services, debt service, capital projects. And so what that looks like over a 20-year period is about $22 million over a 20-year period. That equals $1 million a year. That is not a lot of money. So, if you look back over time, Milwaukie didn't do a lot of transportation projects in the past, but then over the last, 10 years or so, we went out for the transportation bonds. And so we've been able to do a bunch of really great projects. There is the chance that we'll possibly go out for another one of those bonds. That's a city council decision. But if we don't have that, it's kind of up to us to continue to try to find money. And so that's what engineering does on a regular basis. We're getting money from grants from from ODOT and from the state for lots of projects. But so that's an ongoing thing, is that we're always seeking out the money. And that was just to circle back on the next steps. This is for you all to know. We're gonna come back to you all on it's a while now. Yes, it's May 14th. So the next time I'll talk to you about the transportation system plan, I will come back with the draft goals and policies that will have been through the technical advisory committee, the advisory committee, technical committee, through the community. So we will have done the revisions through all of those processes, and then we'll bring them to you on May 14th. And so then we will let you all say, oh, what did you not get right? Why did you do this? Ask questions and make suggestions to changes to the goals and policies. And then we take them to city council as well. So it'll kind of be this iterative thing. So I'll be checking in with you all every couple of months as we get pieces through the community and come in and then talk to you all about it. And that's pretty much the high level overview of where we are with the TSP. I did that really fast, and I don't know if you have any questions.
Well, I see that Commissioner Edge has raised his hand, and as our liaison from the Planning Commission, I'd be delighted to have him lead off on some questions.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Laura. The primary role I was playing at that last TSP-AC meeting where we were talking about the goals and policies was, really to kind of, draw the parallels between, existing policies then from the plan that we adopted in 2020. And so, there was a lot of that. But, I wanted to take the opportunity now to kind of, add a little bit extra over what I contributed at that meeting that really is more appropriate, I think, in this venue. So when we adopted the comp plan in 2020, when we went through that whole process, there were several times where I was advised by staff predominantly that when we came that the policy, certain policies or goals that I might have been advocating for at the time were really better suited for Chapter 12, for the Transportation System Plan. And then, and so, I kind of held on to those, right? And have been waiting for, the work on Chapter 12 to begin. And then now that we're getting into this, we're kind of getting into this where there's a little bit of tension between, this idea of the TSP as Chapter 12 of the comp plan, which theoretically should have goals and policies that are consistent with the framework of all of the other chapters of the comprehensive plan that was adopted in 2020, versus this idea of the TSP as kind of a standalone thing where the goals and policies that are in the TSP are used to prioritize the projects that go into the CIP, basically. And so I'm kind of stuck. I'm a little torn. I don't know what to do here because obviously we need the TSP to function in the way that you're talking about, where if we need to be prioritizing projects based on where they're hitting the marks on our TSP goals, then we need goals that accomplish that and basically reach out and complement, or echo, reflect policies and goals from other chapters of the comprehensive plan. But also, this chapter needs transportation goals and policies that are just the transportation goals and policies. We could have policies for each of the modal elements of the transportation system plan. So there's a pedestrian element, there's a bicycle element, there's a motor vehicle, roadway element, there's a freight element. We should have goals and policies for all of these elements that are consistent with all of the other chapters of our adopted comprehensive plan. But I see how we don't want those to necessarily be the criteria by which we're scoring, counting the goals that are checked off by certain transportation projects in order to prioritize them. So can you help me understand how we can accomplish both of these things so that we have a rational Chapter 12 of the comp plan that fits in with the rest of the comp plan in that framework and, hits these, kind of policy angles that I'm, referring to, as well as having the goals and policies that apply directly to the prioritization of projects that go into the CIP. And I have more to talk about after this, but I'd like to hear you address that first.
Sure, that's a good question. Thank you for bringing that up. I think that for the goals and policies in the in the comprehensive plan, Those are all based on spending hours and hours on Ryan's behalf and of going through all of the other plans and making a kind of a list of all of the goals and policies and all of the other plans that would relate to transportation system planning, right? And then going through and kind of culling down all of those goals and policies. And again, we're going to talk deeply about the goals and policies in May. So I'm just kind of like giving you a preview of that. But I think that having the goals and policies that we have right now they are meant to be in the comprehensive plan, and that's how they're functioning. They do speak to those other, they do speak to the rest of the comprehensive plan, Commissioner Edge, and I think that if there's a place where you don't think that they speak to the comprehensive plan, we should talk about that when we get to when we bring those to you all, because we have done our very best to make sure that we have captured all of those goals and policies. And Ryan, I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
I was just going to add that we did put together a sort of comparison or crosswalk document when we were doing this to sort of say, here, like Laura said, here are all of the transportation related policies across all of the currently in effect City of Milwaukie plans, and how is that policy or goal captured in this new goals and policy document. So we could share that with you as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's a lot of there was a lot of summarizing and trying to distill, I think, key points of those policies. And so there might be sections that you disagree, that you think that it's this policy that was in the comprehensive plan actually isn't fully represented in this new goals and policies document for the TSP. And yeah, we'd encourage you to.
That's not what I was saying. The goals and policies that we saw at the TSPAC meeting, those, it's not that those don't reflect what's in the comp plan. I think you guys did a fine job with that, and those are useful, and those are intended, from what I understand, to help prioritize the projects that would go into the CIP, right?
Yep.
Sorry, I didn't hear you.
Well, I was just going to say, so that was the first part of the answer. Then the second part of the answer, I think, correct me, is I think that you're trying to understand, like, what are some different measures that are more applicable for a TSP that you don't go as deeply into in the comprehensive plan goals and policies? Kind of how are we going to achieve the goals and policies? How do we get there? And what are the specific kind of performance measures that we use to say, are we getting this right? Are we implementing the goals and policies in the TSP? So we have to kind of go into another level of analysis, and we haven't gotten there yet, but we will be getting there as part of the next couple of iterations of the performance measures, and then also looking at the livable streets analysis and those looking at street classifications. And Ryan,
well, and maybe I'm off base here, Commissioner Edge, but I guess I was reading what you were saying to be that there was an inconsistency in formatting and level of detail between what's in the comprehensive plan and what we have proposed.
It's structure.
Yes. Okay.
It's the structure. I want Chapter 12 to be consistent with all of the other chapters, and so it has an intro, it has goals, it has policies. And those should not be the same goals and policies that you're prioritizing projects by. And so it's not a rational, consistent structure with the rest of the comprehensive plan. And, we need a place to be able to put goals and policies that relate to the freight system, goals and policies that relate to the bicycle system. And you know what I mean? It's like we need to be able to, we need a place to organize goals and policies, much as we've done with all of the other chapters. But then we also need the goals that are scoring criteria for, and that's what you guys have provided us, is the in draft form at the last TSPAC meeting. And so I'm not taking issue with those. I think that, I understand how we're going to use those, and that there's an opportunity to, make sure that those are, really reflective of, kind of the whole comprehensive plan, suite of goals and policies, across all of the chapters. but we still need a place in Chapter 12 to carve out goals and policies that are specific to the transportation system that are not directly used to score the projects. You know what I mean? So it's a matter of structure and inconsistent structure and language, I guess, in terms of how we're labeling goals and policies in this Chapter 12 under development versus the whole rest of the plan.
Well, so how about this? So I think that I understand what you're saying, but I also think that the goals and policies that are in the comprehensive plan are what we should be scoring the projects on, because if we are not using the same goals and policies, then we're inconsistent. So how are we meeting the goals in the comprehensive plan if we're not using those exact same goals and policies to score the projects? That said, let me think about that a little bit and go back and look at the structure of the comprehensive plan to ensure that we are getting at, we can respond to you appropriately and say, okay, yeah, we're going to go back and we're going to make it be consistent with how the rest of the comprehensive plan is structured. We haven't been focused on how that comprehensive plan is structured. We've been focused on the TSP and getting the goals and policies for the TSP and knowing that those goals and policies are the goals and policies that we're going to have. So we need to go full circle and make sure we're tying that all up and making sure that we're getting at what you're getting at. So thank you for bringing that up. We've just not been in that context.
Right. It's the tension between it being Chapter 12 in a whole plan and it being a standalone transportation system plan that has its own process defined for how, and deliverables that the state expects, and so, anyway, I get that it's its own thing and that it's just technically Chapter 12, but we need to provide, I think we need to provide that same opportunity for goals and policies of transportation, like the other chapters. So anyway, that was kind of the big meta thing about what we've talked about that I thought was important to get into. It's like I want somewhere to talk about policies for pedestrian districts. Where do we talk about that? Where do we talk about policies for railroad adjacent businesses? I thought that was supposed to be economic development, but when we were doing that and we talked about that, they said, no, that goes in Chapter 12. So here we are talking about Chapter 12, where do we talk about policies about incentivizing railroad adjacent businesses? So it's, I feel like we're, there's some opportunity, or there's some dotting of I's and crossing of T's that we need to do to make sure that, this is a whole plan after this is done. And we are buttoning up the 2020 comp plan with this. And so I think we need to think about it in that context.
Thanks, Commissioner Edge. Yeah, no, please go ahead. I think a benefit is Commissioner Edge has a long memory, and so wanted to make sure that a bite at the apple was promised, and now here we are, ready to circle back on some of those things. It sounded like you had some other questions or comments, though.
I kind of touched on those. I don't want to take all night. I know this is an overview kind of update, but so really my focus is kind of, procedural and just, when do we get the opportunity to do, or was it just that we kind of haven't thought about that, these things yet. And it seems like that might be kind of where we are, as we've been so focused on the new process defined by the LCD or, the transportation planning rule for what we need to do here, that we haven't kind of looked at it in the context of, the whole comp plan. But then the other thing I wanted to say, long memory also, when you were talking about the community profile and the engagement strategies and, how we want to hit targets for, these different groups and everything to make sure that we're doing everything. I just want to say that is exactly what we had in mind when we were drafting up Chapter 1 of, the comp plan goals and policies. That, really the idea that we would set these minimum targets and do what it took to reach that level of engagement from those communities is exactly what we had in mind. And so I really appreciate that, and seeing that that's part of this process. And I realize that it may not be spelled out to the letter, in those comp plan policies, but that was exactly what, we discussed and were envisioning. And so, thank you for thank you for doing that. This is exactly what we wanted to see when we put this together.
Good, thank you. Appreciate that feedback.
Wonder if there's other questions. I had one myself, kind of bridging off of Commissioner Edge's comments or questions on scoring criteria. You know, at the end of the day, we will get to a list of projects. And of course, that list of projects will be informed by a wide variety of stakeholders, community forums, meetings, ourselves, city council. I think based on maybe one thing I guess I'm curious to hear more on is the financially constrained capital project list. I think kind of based off of a briefing I had at work recently, my understanding is DLCD's rules is like we have to come up with a 125% list. So if we have, I think about, it sounds like $22 million to spend over 20 years, 125% of that is $27 million, and we build a list of projects that gets to 27 million and doesn't exceed it. Have you or the consultant team kind of started thinking about like how we're going to kind of narrow down to?
No, we have not. We're at the beginning.
You're at the goals
We're
and
at the, we're at the
visions
goals
and
and policies. Right? We're doing
objectives.
all this,
Yeah,
this early
yeah.
work. We have not gotten there. We're like one
Yeah.
step at a time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would love, I guess, I recognize this is probably fairly early for that. You know, just in conversations I've been having with community members recently, there's a number of community members that are like, you know, we created a priority list of TSP projects last time around, and those projects that I care about still aren't done.
And that will be
And-
true after this TSP as well. I've never been in
Yeah.
a community that didn't have a lot
Well,
of projects
except,
that didn't
except
get
the
done.
state's tightening it up, right? So there's only 25% of the dollars aren't going to, at least kind of based on how I'm understanding things.
Yeah.
So, you know, we don't get to create every chicken in a pot or TSP list anymore. We're gonna have to like narrow it down, is my own understanding.
I think
So-
there probably will be some narrowing, but there's always going to be those projects that don't necessarily rise up to the top of the list, but they still need to be on the list in case an opportunity comes up and then somehow they randomly can get funded, right?
Yeah.
I remember one community I worked in, their second project on their list had been on the list for 15 years and they hadn't gotten it because the funding opportunity didn't line up. So it's kind of an imperfect system, unfortunately.
Okay,
Yeah.
yeah, well,
So
Get into
just
the
a
details of
quick
that.
point of clarification. Isn't the TSP supposed to be like the full build out of the city's transportation network? And then so it's whatever the project list is to achieve full build out?
yeah, I think that's a fair point, Commissioner Edge. I think I'm talking more about the financially constrained capital project list that I think also needs to get developed, and that one is, you know, 120, is limited at 125% of your forecasted revenue, which in our case sounds like about $27 to $28 million.
Right. And I think that is where the goals and policies that we're putting into the new TSP will help prioritize that list. Am I understanding that correctly,
Yes.
Laura?
Yes. You are.
Okay. So it's important that we really make sure that the goals and policies that are part of the TSP, you know, are really used to help the more equitable projects bubble up to the top of the list. So
Yes.
we really need to focus on that over the next couple months.
Yeah. Thanks, Commissioner Edge. That's where I think where you started and where I was ending was part of that stream there. Curious kind of from other folks, other questions or comments.
I just want to say thanks for that presentation. It was comprehensive and high, but helpful. And I'm excited to see where this goes. So.
Great, great. And if you want to do a deep dive in any of those other documents, there are links to them in your packet, so you can check them out. Yeah. We can always go into climate-friendly, equitable.
Can always go
communities.
into climate-friendly, equitable communities. I'm seeing a few head nods there. All right. Well, yeah, thanks so much for the briefing. I think many of us are looking forward to this and look forward to seeing the work as it continues to move forward and talking more about visions, goals, objectives. May, it sounds like.
Yep.
Great. Well, let's move on. Next work session item on climate friendly, equitable community rules. As I think we know, this continues to evolve and adapt, and thanks to talented planning staff like Ryan, the city of Milwaukie continues to pivot as the state changes the rules, clarifies the rules, and those kinds of things. So what do you have for us tonight, Ryan?
Yes, thanks, Chair. Once again, am bringing to you Land Use File ZA. Let me quickly share the screen here.
The good news is that this is the last work session before we have a hearing. So we're making it. We have paid attention to all the changes. Ryan has been doing another deep dive, and so this should be the last before we get to the hearing.
I don't want this like that, though. One moment, please. Okay. There we go. Yes, so I am once again bringing to you Land Use File ZA 2022-005. So this one has been in the works for a few years now. And just to refresh everyone's memory, hopefully one last time here, this all started when Governor Brown issued an executive order, number 2004, basically directing state agencies and commissions to take action to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And so that initiated a rulemaking at the state land use division, so the Department of Land Conservation and Development, and their main priority was to reduce transportation-related greenhouse gas emissions. So they changed a few sections of the Oregon Administrative Rules. The big one here is they updated the transportation planning rule, which governs how jurisdictions do their transportation system plans and how they coordinate transportation and land use planning. So that included a change to how jurisdictions can regulate off-street parking standards. So we have, I guess, big picture, we brought this to you many times before, and you even did recommend approval of a very similar set of code amendments back in about a year ago in February of 2023. And we then brought those to City Council for a work session and paused that adoption when we learned that the state was going to be going through a second corrections and clarifications rulemaking process, just to try to solve some issues that had come up as they started implementing the new rules. So we then requested an extension for specifically the section of rules that deals with off-street parking, and we're granted that extension by the state. So previously we had to adopt new rules by June 30th of 2023. We have now until June 30th of 2024 to update our zoning code to comply with these new rules. So this is just a review of everything I just told you. The only thing I would note is that in addition to this, we took this pause, we took this time to look a little bit harder at our standards for bicycle parking. And we came to you all in July of 2023 to discuss those proposed amendments. And we had, you might remember that we had discussed sort of doing those amendments on a sort of separate track, but then we learned that those there are specific provisions in the transportation planning rule that deal with bicycle parking requirements, and we learned about the time that we were telling you that we were going to move forward with this, that the state was also going to be touching some of those rules through their corrections and clarifications process, and so we decided to just pause everything and do it all together. So we incorporated those changes that we were going to make and discussed with you in July to the bicycle parking section of the Milwaukie Municipal Code 19609, and we included those in this set of amendments. So an overview of the proposed amendments. So CFEC-driven changes, things that we are required to do under the administrative rules. Remove vehicle parking requirements, if you remember, and I have a little slide in our back pocket here to show the map that basically what the rules said is that anywhere near frequent transit, so transit that was arriving every 15 minutes, the city could no longer require off-street parking mandates within, if I remember correctly, it's a 3/4 mile within from a transit stop to like light rail, orange line, and a half mile from frequent bus stops. And so what that means in effect for the city is that I think it was around 80% of properties could no longer have parking mandates. And so with that information, our recommendation and what you approved in February was that the city move forward with just eliminating off-street parking mandates citywide, because there was an additional component to the rules that said, cities, if you're going to keep off-street parking mandates at all, you can't require them in those frequent transit areas, and there are certain land uses that you cannot require them for. And so again, the decision was to just move forward with eliminating those parking mandates. So that's the big one, but then also we removed references to required parking throughout the code. There were some new standards for large parking lots, and there was a little change through the corrections and clarifications process to that rule in particular, and we'll talk more about that in a second. And then also the bicycle parking, you will notice that it is hovering in between CFEC-driven changes and non-CFEC related changes. That is because some of the new code language that we are proposing through this amendment package is driven by changes in the administrative rules to bicycle parking standards. So what the state is telling us that we need to do with bicycle parking in many of the changes are related to issues with the bicycle parking code that staff have observed for a long time. And so it's both driven by CFEC, but it's also driven by those issues that we have sort of recognized and took this opportunity to address. Then there are some just straight up non-CFEC related changes to the code as well. So we took an opportunity just when we were in 19600, which is our off-street parking chapter of the code. We took an opportunity to make some adjustments. One was related to plex development and the number of parking spaces that can be in the required front yard. We'll talk about that in a second. And then various minor non-substantive language changes for just to have consistency within the code. So those were in there before, and I'm just pointing them out again here. So changing things like single family to single detached dwelling. Moving on, so changes since your recommendation in February of last year. And I would say that this, the corrections and clarifications process changed multiple sections of the administrative rules, but for our purposes, I think here tonight, I think the changes that were made to OAR 660, 12405 are the ones that are most pertinent. And those are the ones that are telling jurisdictions what types of standards they have to adopt and apply whenever somebody builds a new large parking lot. And a large parking lot is defined in the rules as anything that is a half acre or larger. Previously in the rules, so this is a change that happened through the corrections and clarifications process. Previously, that threshold was a 1/4 acre. So the state changed that. They received feedback from multiple communities, and they decided that a more appropriate threshold was a half acre. We took that information and adopted that new threshold. we can always be more restrictive with that threshold if we wanted to continue, if we wanted to apply it to quarter acre thresholds. We would still be in compliance with the rules, but we went ahead and are recommending in this code amendment that we go with the half acre threshold. Moving on from that, the state removed some more prescriptive elements of how pedestrian connections needed to work in large parking lots. So there were some standards in the administrative rules about how sidewalks, for example, needed to be abutting basically abutting buildings in all circumstances. And I think it was pointed out that there are some situations where maybe that's not always feasible or wouldn't lead to the best outcome for pedestrian circulation. And so I think they loosened up a little bit on that. And so we removed then in this code package, some of those, we had included those requirements and we removed them to give a little bit more flexibility. So moving on from that, all large parking lots must provide a minimum of a 30% tree canopy. This is a new requirement. So this section of the rules requires new large parking lots to do certain things. All of them have to do this, X, Y, and Z. And then also they have to choose from among a few different what they're referring to as climate mitigation acts. And so that includes things like adding on-site solar or providing additional tree canopy. So something that changed through the rules is tree canopy used to be one of many climate mitigation actions that a developer who is building a new large parking lot could choose from. Now there's a baseline of 30% tree canopy that all parking lots have to do, and then they can choose as one of their climate mitigation acts to go up to 40%, or they could leave it at 30% and also provide on-site solar, for example. That the threshold for, and I appreciate, I know this is all a little in the weeds, complicated, but the threshold for the climate mitigation action through the corrections and clarifications was reduced from 50 to 40%. So we made that change in our proposed code as well. So I think there was some maybe negotiation there that all parking lots will be at least providing some tree canopy, and for the climate mitigation action, we're going to reduce it from 50% to 40%. So those are the most, what I thought to be sort of the biggest changes from what was recommended, what you all recommended back in February of 2023. At least for the large parking lot rules. Maybe it's best to pause here and see if anybody has any questions about those before we dive into the bicycle parking. Can I?
Yeah, Commissioner Edge, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Ryan. With the large parking lots, first thing I would say is in the context of a city like Milwaukie, we're built out, it's kind of a small, geographic area, relatively speaking. It feels like you can justify saying that a quarter acre is a large parking lot when you're talking about creating a new parking lot in this city. It feels like a quarter acre would meet that threshold just, intuitively. So I would say, go with what we had before. and I realize that we don't have to, like you said, but we can be a little bit more restrictive. And I think that in our context, that would be appropriate. So I'd say, to put that back at a quarter acre. And then, I'm also thinking, because of, and I think we talked about this before, but as we're talking about creating new regulations around whatever we define as large parking lots, particularly if it ends up being a half acre or larger, I think it's really important that that new large parking lots are designed so that they can be redeveloped, as a new lot, or, with buildings, new buildings, or whatever, and so, however we, if we feel like the code already satisfies this because of, how we require, lot lines and everything, and setbacks, then great. But I really want to be intentional about, the code kind of guiding new parking lots towards patterns that allow for redevelopment of those lots at some point in the future. So that's, I just wanted to advocate for that again. I think that's maybe all I have on the large parking lots. I really like the idea of kind of sticking with where we were to begin with, and even with maybe some of the tree canopy stuff. I mean, again, we're trying to get tree canopy, across 40% tree canopy coverage across the entire city. We have to, if 30% is all we're requiring for large parking lots, and not all parking lots, but large parking lots, if I understand that correctly. So you build a new large parking lot and it's going to be a tree canopy desert. It should contribute more tree canopy, than I think the baseline, because we're really trying to get to 40% citywide, and where we allow only 30%, you're creating a deficit that we have to make up somewhere else. And so we have to think about where the opportunities are, because, in a lot of cases, we aren't going to reach 40% on a lot of sites across the city. Where are the opportunities to mitigate the deficits, the sites with deficits of under 40% canopy coverage? So are large parking lots one of those opportunity sites where we should actually be striving for more than 40% tree canopy coverage? I think it's worth discussing. I think it's worth considering. So, yeah, I think that's all I've got for the large parking lots right now.
Great, thanks, Commissioner Edge. I think on the new large parking lots, I would also support returning back to the quarter acre, and would be curious to hear just from other commissioners on that specifically. I'm also, and maybe it's just kind of outside of the scope, but of what we're talking about here. But Commissioner Edge, what you were saying also is making me think about sites that may have existing large parking lots as they go through improvements or other permitting processes. What can the city do there to also increase tree canopy on those sites? I like to think that our friends at New Seasons Market would have happily maybe planted tore up a few parking spots and planted a few trees in order to meet our shared goals on climate. And, I think that if we could think about existing large parking lots, there's probably an opportunity there. Realize that might fall outside of the scope of these code changes we're making now today. Which are really driven by CFEC, but it's probably something to put on the work list for whenever we get to whatever the section of code would be there.
I would look, and I'd love to hear more about what everybody thinks about the quarter acre and tree canopy standards. I would just add to this conversation that the one additional thing that might change between now and when we come back to you next month, hopefully for a recommendation, is we received some comments today from DLCD that were helpful. Just they had reviewed our code, and one thing they noted was just around applicability for exactly the scenario that you're talking about when redevelopment of lots occurs. And so we've included some language you'll see in both in newly proposed 19606-4, where these standards are proposed to live in the code, and also in 19602, which is an applicability section for all of Chapter 600 that gets at when redevelopment is happening or people are making modifications to an existing parking lot that meets this half acre or quarter acre threshold, or would meet that threshold with the proposed changes, what are we going to be requiring to bring people closer into conformance with these new requirements? And there's obviously a proportionality conversation that needs to happen there as well. And so we have a meeting scheduled for tomorrow to talk more about those changes. Currently, and the state gave some direction on this in guidance document, that parking is considered new when a certain percentage of existing asphalt or concrete is excavated, versus, for example, doing an overlay or just basic maintenance or restriping a lot. And so what's in the code that you have in your packet tonight is 50% is what we were proposing. Seemed like a reasonable
50% new.
When 50% of existing asphalt or concrete is excavated, then you would have to comply with the standards. I think there's still an outstanding question. I think a big focus of our conversation tomorrow will be on what about expansions that you're adding 5 spaces that put you over that threshold of a half acre or quarter acre. What can we require in that situation? And that's where, making sure that we're taking that opportunity to improve existing, because that is mostly what we will see, where we will see this happen is through redevelopment. Taking that opportunity to make those improvements while also making sure that what we're requesting is proportional.
Yeah, and I think on that, just to follow on for a quick second, thanks for the additional information. I'm excited to hear you're having that conversation. And, maybe on the proportionality topic, just thinking about new construction of a parking lot, probably a lot easier to organize a site to meet 40%. And so, maybe if there is a space for us to think about, improvements on an existing parking lot, maybe it should be 15%, 20%, 25%. Certainly the marginal difference between 0 and wherever we land is a big improvement, right? And we should see about what we could do to get there, and probably don't need to go as far as 40% or something like that. But I think, as Commissioner Edge pointed out, the existing large parking lots become heat island deficits that we're trying to make up in other places. And so as a property owner is making improvements, or maybe not laying new asphalt, maybe even repaving, overlay, I think we should be thinking about that. So.
Thanks for stating all of that much more eloquently than my question would ramble on. Have we done any sort of buildable lands analysis paired to this, so we understand, what commercial land is either vacant or just what those lot sizes are, to where we know is a quarter acre the majority of what would the possibility of them to be redeveloped? Or, I would like to see those numbers, A. B, maybe to shift the conversation, maybe there's a tiered approach where we have regulations for quarter acre, regulations for half acre. It may help in terms of who the not the end users, but who the developers are. Smaller site, probably not as big of a market share, or not as big of a cash flow, where they're going to get hit, and any sort of redevelopment possibility is tanked because they can't make that happen. Or I don't, just so we're keeping that in consideration, that we're not. These are fantastic goals, and I 100% support this. I just want to make sure that we have ways and avenues to work with folks who are trying to do the right thing. So.
We do have a buildable lands analysis that we can look at, and we also have, it's very We do have a buildable lands analysis that we can look at, and we do have very few large parking lots, very few. So,
Yeah, and I guess I would add on to that and say we have not done if the question was, have we done like a BLI type analysis for just to inventory how many parking lots would meet this threshold? No, we have selected a few to say like what does a quarter acre look like, just to give some context. Yeah, we haven't gone as far to, I think those GIS skills might be above me to identify all those large parking lots. But and then to your second point, just about like not wanting to recognize that that, and we definitely support these goals, but are constantly reminded in conversations with the public that that we also don't want to kill projects. We want people to be able to do things, and that the standards that we adopt have an influence what people can do. So, and there's a cost benefit.
In that related conversation, is there, considerations of bonuses in terms of, if we do this, what can be scratched off of the development or improvement list to help offset some of those costs? But just, we don't have to think of those now, but just
Sure.
to explore and research if that's a possibility anywhere.
Yeah, and I wonder if there's, so as noted initially, we are on a deadline here to adopt standards that comply with these rules by June 30th.
June's very far away, Ryan.
But we have, yes, true. A few more steps in this process.
I'm not recommending you go back and do a 3-month study, so.
We should probably start all over.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, I guess I would just say, I know that there's been, hopefully I'm not stepping out of my lane too far here, but there's been a conversation about what a commercial tree code would look like in the city. So maybe there's an opportunity through that conversation to reopen these provisions as well. And if not, then maybe it's also just something we can independently open back up.
Any other thoughts, comments, questions on this topic? Any other commissioners want to weigh in on the half acre versus quarter acre amendment that was suggested by Commissioner Edge?
Yeah, I would just say that I generally agree with the quarter acre probably being a better fit for Milwaukie. And just for kind of the reasons stated. So that's where I would fall on that.
Thanks, Commissioner Mulhorn. And Commissioner Lostfeld, we'll give you a pass since even if you approve or disapprove, you won't have a vote next meeting. Right. So you'll be voting in spirit, watching maybe with Commissioner Hemer on cable access.
But before we move on, sorry, I just wanted to clarify, is there intensification of a site or a use? Would that trigger any required park? Yeah.
No, and that's I think exactly what I was kind of thinking of, is that use case where, the sea of asphalt at Milwaukie Marketplace is getting new tenants in. And it seems like it would be really interesting or exciting to try and get just a few trees in there. And how could we go about doing that? It doesn't mean we need to tear up the whole parking lot and plant a forest, but in today, if a development like that were to go in, we would get some trees on little islands every now and then. And it would just be nice to think about as a site, improves, if there's a way to kind of take a step in that direction. Doesn't need to get to 40%.
Oh, okay, I will add another idea. What if in a scenario where you create a bank, like if you can't, make the improvements on your own, that you contribute towards some kind of future savings or future amendments to said parking?
Yes, so there is in the OARs, you might have noticed, or maybe not, and this is just a great original idea that is also consistent with what folks who were writing these rules were thinking, but there was a provision in the rules, or is a provision in the rules, that folks not able to comply with one of the climate mitigation actions could pay into a fund, either that was operated by the city or is at the state level and those funds would be used for equitable solar and wind development projects. The Oregon Department of Energy would manage that fund. I believe this is still the case, that that fund has not yet been set up. And the city does not currently have, also does not have a fund set up to accept and then invest in equitable solar and wind development projects. So I guess I would conclude those thoughts just by saying that it is an option that we could still revisit down the line if that's something that the city wanted to explore, or if the state has more clearly laid out what that would look like in terms of paying into
But Ryan,
those
can I
funds.
ask a clarifying question? Is that just if the applicant cannot meet the requirements?
I guess they could choose to. We could write it so that they could choose to pay into that instead of.
Because I
yeah.
think this is more about folks redeveloping an existing parking lot, and that we have a problem, I think, trying to extract things from them, because unless they go over a certain threshold of redevelopment, we can't get much from them, right? So especially in a place like Milwaukie Marketplace, that's the real rub. I hear exactly what you're saying. So maybe we can think a little bit about is there a way to get more at what you all are asking without getting ourselves into trouble with the proportionality question.
And we currently, the way that the code is currently written, we can, when there is a change of use, or there is an intensification of use and that new building floor area is added, we can get improvements. It just, the code does also stipulate limitations on what those improvements can be. And that is, all of that is part of the conversation that we're planning to have tomorrow.
Right, and so when you have a new grocery store go into an old grocery store space, you're not intensifying the use, you're not adding anything. So the threshold for triggering requirements is low.
But are they overlaying the parking lot? I mean, the asphalt there is not very great.
I don't know the answer to that question.
I don't know either. Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't review the new seasons.
Yeah. Anyways,
but
yeah, or
no,
watering
we
down.
understand
You
what
understand the
we
larger.
understand.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure.
Commissioner Edge
I
also
know
has
Commissioner
the same
Edge,
note.
exactly, yeah.
Thank you, Chair. Just to follow up on kind of where this has gone. We really should be focused on, additional parking that's built, and when you change a use or even intensify the use, I mean, we aren't requiring minimum parking. And so it's kind of hard to say, well, you're intensifying the use, so you have to go fix all your parking. And so anyway, I don't know. I'm not sure what, where I land on that, but the main thing I'm getting at is that the CIAC rules provide all of this opportunity for, freely wheelie, just removing parking spaces and changing them to, stormwater or trees or bike parking or, all kinds of, other uses that are, more climate friendly than having a motor vehicle parking space there or whatever. So I just want to make sure that, and I'm pretty sure the DLCD won't lead you astray on this, but I just want to make sure that, we kind of keep in mind that we don't want to penalize anybody for ripping out parking, or, touching their parking, and triggering some threshold, when they're doing something else that we really want them to be doing, like removing parking. We don't want some rule to be written that, trips a threshold that they have to do all of this extra stuff when they're already planning, and maybe that's what they're proposing to do is tearing up some parking area for, reconfiguring parking and including more trees. whatever. So I just don't want to penalize anybody for doing things that are consistent with what we're trying to do. Like maybe remove it, an intensification of use could be like at Milwaukie Marketplace, you carve out some spot on some of the parking lots to put up a new restaurant or something like that. And, you're not adding parking, but you are touching an amount of parking area, you know what I mean? And so I don't want stuff like that to end up, that's a desirable outcome, to have less parking and more uses, more services or more, whatever. And so I just want to make sure that we're not penalizing anyone for doing, tripping some threshold in the process of doing something that we really want them to be doing anyway, and then penalizing them for it.
That's great. Thanks, Commissioner Edge. I appreciate the frame there to think about it. You could envision Milwaukie Marketplace having more businesses tucked into that parking lot, more walkable spaces and things like that. So appreciate you kind of broadening our thinking and our approach there. If we don't have anything else, maybe we can move on to new bike parking standards. We can try and set a record here for longest meeting since it's Commissioner Loosveld's last meeting. I'm more than happy to do that. It's been a while since we've got till 10 p.m.
Yes, moving on. So, yeah, as I mentioned, just sort of the overview of the timeline on all of this, we, in July of 2023, brought some new draft language to you that would amend 19609, our bicycle parking chapter. We're trying to do a few different things with that code. We wanted to establish new minimum bicycle parking quantity standards. This is important from a CFAC perspective because currently the way the code is written, you might remember, is that we derive our minimum number of bicycle parking stalls that need to be provided for commercial and industrial and institutional development. That's all a percentage of the required number of automobile parking spaces. And so when we eliminate automobile parking requirements from the city, then we don't have a great way to calculate that minimum number of bicycle parking spaces that need to be provided. We also are proposing a new modification process, and I don't know that this was fully fleshed out when we talked to you in July about this, but we were cognizant of conversations that were happening between the city of Portland and the development community around bicycle parking and its implications, particularly for residential development in the city. And I think some of that conversation filtered up to the state as well, with certain housing focused groups, submitting comments, trying to ensure that bicycle parking wasn't didn't inhibit new residential development, particularly in desirable infill locations. And so through the corrections and clarifications process, the state did, I will note, amend the, like I said, the rule that deals with bicycle parking. And one of those changes that was made was to reduce previously the transportation planning rule required that jurisdiction include a standard ratio of 1 bicycle parking space per dwelling unit for multifamily development and mixed use projects. And that has now been reduced to, I believe it's a half space per unit. We did not propose changing. Currently, our standard is a 1-to-1 ratio. We did not propose changing that. We have not heard from developers of multifamily projects in Milwaukie that's been an issue to accommodate that requirement. So we did not feel a need to change it at this point, but open to your thoughts on that. And then a big point for us was to more clearly define in this code, there was We did not call it this, or we do not call it this in our current code, but there is in effect a distinction between short and long-term parking spaces, short-term being those you would see on the street, for example, and long-term being those that would be reserved for the primary users of whatever was happening on the site, so employees or residents. So we, in effect, have this sort of division in some instances, but we wanted to codify it more clearly. So we added new quantity requirements and then standards for long and short-term bicycle parking. And just a note, I think we mentioned it during the July session, but Portland did a lot of work to refine their bicycle parking code, and so we drew heavily from their staff report, which they did a lot of public engagement, a lot of site visits, a lot of really a deep dive into their standards and what was working and what wasn't working. And so we ate all that up and tried to create something that worked for Milwaukie, recognizing that at the same time they did a lot of work, but we're not Portland. So hoping that we struck the right balance there. Any questions about bicycle parking before moving on to the sort of non-CFEC related changes?
Gone?
Okay, great.
Thanks.
Wow. Okay, and then last set of changes, I think that were made since y'all made your recommendation in February of last year was while we were in Chapter 600 and looking at all of our parking standards, there were a couple of additional changes that we thought we could accommodate through this process. So one, and this kind of cropped up because we just have been seeing some new development proposals for plexes, which previously were not permitted in the city. So one was to treat quadplexes the same way we were treating single detached units, duplexes, and triplexes. And so currently, the code was written, I want to say it was maybe in the early 2000s, a provision was added to our off-street parking standards for residential development that limited the total number of parking spaces that could be located in a required front yard. So for most residential properties, that's the first 20 feet of the property. That's the setback requirement. And so with that provision, we were, I think, basically trying to prevent people from just paving their whole front yard and having a large parking lot in the front yard. The change here is just to acknowledge that for making the allowance only for quadplexes to have up to 4 spaces in that required front yard. That we're then treating duplexes, single detached units, triplexes, and quadplexes all the same, that they all are allowed one parking space. So this just came up recently with a new development, and we sort of recognized that it probably made sense to treat all of those equally. And then, and happy to answer any questions about that. And then the second was, in that same section in 607, those off-street parking standards for small-scale residential development, there's some limitations that includes that max of 3 parking spaces in the required front yard, but it also includes a prohibition on, or a requirement, I should say, that off-street parking spaces be comprised of a durable and dust-free hard surface. The point of that, as it has been explained to me, is to prevent gravel intrusion into the right-of-way for multiple reasons, but for bike ped ease of access, I think is a big one. The current code does not require that parking spaces for boat or RVs be within a required yard area. So within that required front yard or a street side yard, for example, it does not require that those spaces be comprised of a durable and dust-free hard surface. And so I think in furtherance of that goal to sort of prevent gravel intrusion into the right-of-way, we amended the language to say, anytime you have a boat or RV parking area located within a required front yard, or street side yard, or side yard, it needs to be comprised of a durable and dust-free hard surface.
Any questions or comments on these? I'll jump in. I actually feel pretty strongly about the second bullet point. And I understand the concerns about gravel intruding into the right-of-way and the challenges that could cause for bicycles or pedestrians. But I think where I'm kind of thinking about this is from a perspective where in Ardenwald, my neighborhood, and probably many other neighborhoods around the city, I'm just like scanning roads in my mind. The right-of-way isn't fully built out. And so to be asking a property owner to incur a significant expense to essentially put a paved pad to park their boat or their RV, when you might have a strip of pavement that doesn't fully go to the end of the right-of-way, and there is no stormwater, and there is no curb, and the city itself has tons of gravel between the private property and the paved portion of the right-of-way, it seems very unreasonable. And so I don't think I will be supporting this.
I will just follow up with just a couple of quick comments. Yes, that is true, and we recognize that that tension. And I would say that this code amendment, it doesn't say that nowhere on your property can you have a graveled boat or RV parking. It's just within that required yard. And then B, I guess it's striving to, the code standard currently applies to automobile parking, and so it's trying to treat automobile parking and boat and RV parking similarly.
Sure.
So I don't know if that influences you at all, but I understand the tension there.
Yeah, thanks. I don't think that it does, because I think I could see this making sense on a street segment that has curb to curb fully built out, which we do have some of those streets in the city of Milwaukie. So I think this makes a lot of sense in that context. But in the context of the vast majority of other streets we have, to show up and knock on somebody's door and tell them they've got to move their boat or their RV onto a pad they have to pave, when between their property line and 10 feet could just be a bunch of gravel the city has there. It just, to me, it doesn't pass the sniff test. So, if this is included in a package as currently proposed, I will be voting no on it.
Fair enough.
I think I'm there with you, and I think I need clarification on a boat or RV, a hypothetical, if it was parked in the front yard on grass, walk me through the difference between a required front yard versus driveway. It's late and I'm tired. But.
Fair enough. I think I follow you. So grass would not be an appropriate, per our code, place to park a boat or an RV, because it's basically what we require right now, or what we allow for, is gravel. This is saying that, if that parking space is located within your yard setback, that first 20 feet, that that needs to be paved. And basically it needs to be paved, even if it's further than that, at least that first, that section of 20 feet would need to be paved. Does that help clarify?
I think so. So like, our current code already requires for those vehicles to be on a surface other than their front grass.
Yeah, it can't be in the grass. Yeah. But yeah, I would love to hear from others.
Yeah,
on
Commissioner
this.
Edge, I know your hand is up.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Ryan. So with this one, I guess my concern, I mean, I tend to agree, about, there being a, context that, might be appropriate for the RV parking issue. But with both that, as well as the allowing additional space in the front yard setback, required front yard for a quadplex, what I'm trying to ultimately get to is not to pave over everything. So, I want to make sure that, when we're thinking about, I mean, I know we have other standards that need to be addressed, such as, maximum site coverage. And, I guess we don't really have a landscaping standard. Do we have a landscaping standard for middle housing? I don't think we do. But we have the tree canopy, the coverage that we're trying to get, and everything. And so anyway, I don't want to see us allowing things just to get, paved over because, it is generally consistent with, these other, similar housing types to, get one space per unit in, per dwelling in, in a space constrained front yard, setback scenario. I'm not sure what I think about that. I really think that there's value in not paving over everything. And so, I'm wrestling with that tension. And just wondering, what kind of provisions are there to make sure that, this isn't really eroding our goal of not having, too much yard paved over on these sites.
100%, if I can jump in quickly. So there are landscaping standards for, they apply at the base zone level. So in the moderate density residential zone, they're based on the lot size. There are overall lot landscaping standards. And then in addition to that, there are specific front yard landscaping standards. So yeah, basically I would say that there are other standards in the code that are mitigating against, paving the entire yard and paving the entire front yard. I don't know if that helps, assure you, but yeah. Okay.
Great. Thanks. Anyone else have any thoughts or comments on this? All right. Well, I think that takes us to questions, which we've been doing. So I don't know if there's anything else. Anything else on this before we kind of close out this work session? All right. Well, why don't we move on to 7.0, Planning Department.
Sorry, that raised hand is a new raised hand.
Yes, no, sorry, thanks. I started to look down at my computer, so I didn't see it pop up over on the screen. Please go, Commissioner Edge.
Yeah, so this is really just, my really pedantic self coming back about something that we've talked about in the past. I know one of the changes that we're kind of sticking in here is to change the terminology from planning director to planning manager, and I just want to say that I think that we can get away with not changing our code in a bunch of places every time that the city decides to hire someone and say, well, you're the planning manager or you're the planning director, and change the title. And Jenny was the planning director, and so the code applied to the planning director. And now Laura was hired as a planning manager, and so we're looking at changing our code everywhere, which is a legislative process. And so I just want to caution us against changing, the terminology of the specific title of the person who's in charge of the planning department. you know, because of just to reflect what the current job title is called. You know, it's kind of like, you know, where we make references to, in like the TSP draft policies, we make a specific reference to the SAFE program. And it's like, well, you know, that's great for now, but later it might not be called SAFE. It might be SAFE 2, or there might be a completely different acronym for whatever replaces it. And then, you know, we have these policies and they reference a thing that, you know, is stale or isn't technically correct. And so we're compelled to go in and change it. And it's a legislative process when we do that. It's just not necessary. So let's just think about how we can change it to where we're not just literally changing planning director to planning manager everywhere. We're really thinking about how can we label this in some ambiguous enough way, some flexible way that that we don't really feel compelled to go back and change it when the job title changes in the future. So that's all. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Commissioner Edge. It's something I talk about with my team as we write code at work. Important to think about those kinds of things so you don't have to have a cleanup process when Laura gets that promotion. Yeah, you are the planning director. Just change the title. Exactly. So yeah, point well taken there. Anything else in terms of questions? Questions or comments? No? Well, let's move on now to 7.0, Planning Department, Commission, other business updates. Any commissioners have any items for discussion?
Me? I'm not a commissioner.
You're not a commissioner. I'm not. Oh yes, Commissioner Edge.
I've got something this time. So last week at the Metro Technical Advisory Committee meeting, there was a panel on middle housing, and so there was half dozen local planners who talked about their jurisdiction's experiences with middle housing so far. And it was super interesting, and Vera represented the city of Milwaukie, which was really cool. And there's a video of this that you can access on OregonMetro.gov website. It was the Metro Technical Advisory Committee meeting on February 21st of 2024. And it's a 90-minute segment, maybe a little over with the Q&A, but you know, yeah, it was really interesting to hear you know, these different jurisdictions talk about, or representatives from these different jurisdictions talk about their city's experiences kind of before and through the adoption process, and then, you know, early on, you know, with what we've seen. So I didn't know if Laura wanted to add anything to that based on anything she might have heard Vera say in response to that, but it was really cool to have Vera participate in that. Thanks, Laura, for allowing her to do so.
Yeah, thanks so much for having her. I think she enjoyed the experience, and I think that it's really great to get these panels together as we're all learning about middle housing and trying to understand. Some of the questions are the same. We're struggling with the same questions, and then some things are a little bit different. And so having those opportunities to share, I think, is good for everybody in the room, Vera and all of the other planners and all of us. So thank you for putting that panel together. Much appreciated.
Yeah, and thanks, Commissioner Edge, for flagging that for all of us. If you wouldn't mind, maybe you could email the link to Laura to send out to planning commissioners who might want to tune in for that. And, you know, I had mentioned it before, Laura, I think it was Vera, and you might have actually not been here, or maybe you were. You know, if there's an opportunity for us as a commission or commission with staff, to tour any of the middle housing developments here in town as they're kind of coming online. I personally would be very fascinated in that. And, you know, I know there was moments, Commissioner Edge and myself and others might reflect back on where I think some stakeholders were saying, oh, nobody's going to build that. We're not going to get any. And that's not the case. And it would just be really interesting to be able to tour a site, hear from the developer or anything like that. So I'll just kind of plant that bug in your ear again.
Yeah, we can definitely keep an eye on that. We've got one I know that's, being built right now, and other ones that are really in the pipeline. They're like just getting ready to
Yeah.
go. So maybe this time next year we'll have like
Yeah.
a little bit more to tour. So that's a great idea.
One of the ones that's going on right now, I kind of consistently think, I'm like, maybe I just pull my car over, nobody's here, walk around, poke around, but, don't need Chief Luke coming, chasing me off the property or anything like that. What's our forecast look like for future meetings?
Well, can I just say something?
Yeah, please.
Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you so much to Commissioner Losfeld for all of her service here on the Planning Commission and the DLC over the last, I don't know, would it be 4 years on the Planning Commission, and then before that, the DLC, quite some time.
Yeah, I know that I started when my 8-year-old was newborn, so
It's been a long time.
I think it's been about at least 7.
Well,
Maybe.
thank you so much for your service. I know that your time was super valuable on the DLC, and then you came and you brought that background and experience to the Planning Commission. And I know that over the last 4 years working with you, you've kind of brought this perspective to the table that's unique. And with your architecture background and with your eye towards historic preservation, and I think that you really have had such a passionate commitment to this community and being sure that we have listened and heard what everybody thinks and feels and understands, and also then being respectful of the code and how processes work, and really being a great voice of reason. And when you were the chair on the Planning Commission, you did a wonderful, excellent job. I think really pulling people out and getting people to talk and really leading great meetings. And I just want to thank you so much for your time here. It's been lovely to work with you, and you've really brought a lot to the commission. So thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, I'd like to second a number of those things as well, Commissioner Losfeld. I think I'm trying to rival you for chair worthiness, but it might take a little bit more. And I think I agree with a lot of what Laura was saying. And I think one thing in particular that continues to stick in my mind, conversation we had at a planning commission meeting, where I think given your eye and training as an architect, I think you rightfully made the comment that, sometimes one of the most important things we're doing is deliberating on the built environment. And I think that's just kind of lodged in my mind, and still very much agree with that. I mean, I do think policy work is really important, but as we're, deliberating over buildings that are going up and changing like the skyline in the city of Milwaukie, that'll continue to kind of stick with me, and hopefully some other planning commissioners as we all kind of move forward. You'll certainly be missed.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Appreciate that. I'm really enjoyed kind of my time here at the DLC and on the Planning Commission. And you forgot to say funny, which maybe is because you thought otherwise.
I always think about you when the clock is ticking. And it's like, Lauren, she would want this to
I've
be
made you
over with.
all anxious apparently about how long meetings go, which I think is very healthy. So good anxiety to keep baggage. I feel so strongly about kind of the volunteerism and kind of our civic duty to be involved in a process, and feel pretty strongly that you're not setting a table for anybody who's willing to kind of pass judgment on a municipality or the process if they're not willing to step in to solve it. And so I'm just encourage anybody to step in when they see it. It's been such a pleasure. There's so many reasons to really appreciate the staff at the city of Milwaukie and the number of people that I've gotten to be on sit at the dais with, or sit at a table on a committee or some aspect. The whole city is so really resounding praise to all the work that you all do, and how much you care and your intentionality behind things. And I know that we butted heads a few times on things we didn't quite align with, but I always felt there was real mutual respect and willingness to dig in, as you say, Laura, and to go back and to reconsider some things. And I think to your point, I felt myself stretched a number of times as an architect on this at this chair, because I tend to think in the scale of 3 to 5 years maybe. And obviously we're talking 30, 50 years, generational timelines and scales. And so I really do, I know that the individual filling my seat may not be a trained architect, but do really encourage you to put that hat on from time to time, because as you say, we're really talking about the human scale here of cities. And it's easy to gloss over that, but I've felt that during my time, you all have rightly cued in on your own experiences in a walkable city or an unwalkable city, or how your children experience spaces, or how you see your neighbors experience them. So I just want to continue to ask you to advocate for your neighbors and advocate for yourselves, your future generations that you may be raising, and make sure to keep that in mind. And I look forward to seeing you all on the future committee. I've told Laura that I never really step down from volunteering, I just move on. And so I'll be moving on to some other format.
We'll figure out how to rope you back in. So.
Laura's got my number, so I'm sure there'll be some kind of task force.
That's right.
It's got to have a cool name though, task force. Safe doesn't really. But thank you. And Commissioner Edge, I want to say special thank you to you, because I know that you've been so supportive and a long-term commissioner, and your support for me, and also just encouragement, and as a working mother as well. And Joseph, you've always been there to kind of help support me when I needed to right balance between my other duties at the office and my duties at home. And so I've appreciated really sharing some of my kind of extracurricular activities through the Planning Commission with you and your support. So thank you to you all. And to the newish commissioners, you guys hopefully just carry it on and continue to the commitment that you've already demonstrated. So thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Well,
I need to keep going because I felt like we should at
yeah,
least.
I mean, we've
got another
we've got
chapter.
an hour and 48 minutes to go till we get to 10 p.m. So, Laura, can you talk very slowly about the forecast for future meetings?
Yes, I can. March 12th. So we're coming back with the Hubs Code amendments. And then we're supposed to come back with CFEC amendments, and I'm hoping that we can do that. We may not fix everything, and we might have to circle back, but we are on a timeline with that. And then on March 26th, we have the Title 17 Code amendments, the land division, which I know is Vera's technical, wonky, nerdy code is what she calls it. And I know she's excited to get that adopted. So that's it.
You said, and that was March 26th?
Yeah.
Okay. Just flagging, I think I flagged in the past, that's spring break as well. So
Yep.
we might need to make sure we're going to not have any quorum issues.
Yeah, we will make sure that we
Yeah.
don't have a quorum issue.
Great.
And if we do, we'll move it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, is there anything else?
What are these?
I guess I've got two things really quick.
Yes, please.
I forgot to say something earlier. Ryan, if you're still listening, could we please not use Comic Sans font in future official city documents? I don't. My eyes are offended.
I think this was in attachment 1, proposed amendments for CFAC.
The code commentary version.
The code-
Yeah, I don't
just-
know. And it seems that other jurisdictions do that as well, but yeah, I mean, noted.
It's
I don't
not
think there's any
appropriate.
official rule that we have to use it. I think it's just been practiced I think because it is so startling, I think it differentiates from
that it's
what is
not
actually
code,
code
it's the
language and what
commentary.
is commentary. But I want you to read the commentary, so maybe it's too startling. Yes. Thank you for
It
that.
burns my eyes.
Burns Commissioner.
Maybe that's just me, but anyway, yeah, that was my really nitpicky thing. I had a pedantic thing earlier. This is really just super nitpicky. But and then anyway, the last thing I wanted to say is thank you for your service, Lauren. I've been serving with you since 2018. When we worked on the downtown design review standards in the DLCD, and so. Your contribution has been tremendous, and thank you so much for everything you've done and everything that you will do in the future. It's been great to work with you, and I super appreciate your commitment to the city.
Yeah.
Thanks, Joseph.
very much valued. One of these days, we should probably vote on what our approved font set is. So Commissioner Edge, if you want to start curating a list, I'll entertain a motion at another meeting.
I'm not a designer. I'm an engineer.
We might need city council to ultimately approve that though for us. And the geese here, I believe, is for heated city council meetings when they need to get on the stack and, want to be the one to talk next. You kind of put your geese up.
Really?
Yeah, I believe it. I believe that's the case.
I think
So,
it wasn't always heated. It was just a way to say,
It's just, yeah.
I want to talk
You want
now.
to jump in
Oh,
and
did
talk
anybody
now.
ask the geese if that offended them, that they were like,
Well, you'll have to come back and figure that out at a future planning commission meeting, because I think to make sure Commissioner Losfeld gets out of here before 8:30 PM, I'm wondering if I could entertain a motion to adjourn.
I motion that we adjourn my final meeting at the dais for the Planning Commission of the City of Milwaukee.
It's been moved.
Second.
It's been
I'll second.
seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
everybody.
Thank you much, Commissioner Losfeld.